Members or officers in physical attendance with an electronic device to mute it to avoid feedback, please. And any remote participants, could you please keep your microphone off unless you wish to speak. Please note the meeting has been recorded and that staff may use body-worn cameras within the premises. Data captured during these recordings will be processed and retained in accordance with the Council's data retention policy, and the meeting recording may be published on the Council's website. Members accessing the meeting remotely should use their Swelborough Council or Kent County Council laptop to participate virtually. If you join us using the link on the website or on a mobile and tablet device, it is not possible to identify you and you will not be recorded as being in remote attendance. Members could ask you to speak loudly and clearly into your microphones and to switch your microphone off after speaking, otherwise remote participants may be unable to hear the next speaker. Well, welcome everyone to this Policy and Resources Committee meeting, including visiting members and those attending remotely and members of the public. Welcome the following staff that are in attendance at the meeting room or remotely, which are Chief Executive Larissa Reid, Director of Resources Lisa Fillery remotely, Head of Place Joanne Johnson in person, Monitoring Officer Robin Harris in person, Policy and Engagement Officer Janet Dart in person, Head of Revenues and Benefits Zoe Kent, was going to be in person but Zoe's online. Project Manager Planning Policy Stuart Watson, Principal Heritage Officer Jamil Kishore, and Planning Manager for Policy Natalie Earle in person. The Planning Manager, Planning Applications Ian Harrison in person, and Democratic Services Officer Tim Neal in person. You'll be pleased to know there is no fire drill planned, and if the alarm sounds, those in attendance should leave via the exits indicated and assemble outside where directed. Do not use the lifts, and please could I now ask that if anyone in attendance needs assistance, make themselves known to me, please. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Are there any apologies for absence, please? And confirmation of substitutes?
Thank you, Chair. We've received no apologies this evening, so we're all accounted and present.
Thank you. Members, could I ask you to approve the minutes of the meetings held on the 4th of February 2026, minute numbers 698 to 712, please?
Point of order, Chair.
Councillor Bollock, yeah.
We've got no apologies. I think we have one substitution, or there's currently a vacancy listed on our membership, so that needs to be clarified.
Yep.
Thank you, Councillor Baldock. Councillor Chapman is substituting for the vacancy, but he's not substituting for a member.
Thank you. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Although we're agreeing the February minutes, we still have outstanding the December and January extraordinary meetings. I asked the question at the last meeting when we'd be agreeing them. I was directed to this meeting, but they're not before us again.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll have a look at that one, Councillor Jones, and come back to you outside of the meeting. Thank you. We now move on then. Members, sorry, is it your wish that then I sign off those minutes to record for February? Thank you. Item 5, matters arising. I've been notified of any matters arising from that. Items for noting, which is item 6, the forward decisions plan. Are you happy to note it? Thank you very much. Yeah, I must skip that. It's not on my little list. Okay. Members, are there any of you that's got any declarations of either pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest? Thank you. Councillor Jays.
More a question from Monitor Officer. Obviously, lots of parish councils are mentioned in the review. Do we all need to run through what various parish councils we're on, or are we happy with that?
I think we're happy with it.
Thank you.
And thank you from me too. Okay. We move on to the items then for the formal agenda. And the first one is item 7, which is houses in multiple occupation, SPD consultation launch. Could I please ask our officer to introduce it?
Thank you, Chairman. Evening, councillors. There's a lot of acronyms, so please correct me or stop me if anyone wants any acronyms explaining. This is an item about the HMO SPD. It was first raised at the full council meeting on the 1st of October last year, where a motion was passed for an SPD to be prepared and an Article 4 direction to be served to control the ability to change the use of dwellings into HMOs, small HMOs. The request was for the SPD to cover 4 topics, which include the dispersal of HMOs and the concentration of HMOs, parking provisions for HMOs, the bin storage, and minimum room sizes. From that, on the 22nd of January this year, at the PTPWG committee, officers presented a programme for taking the SPD forward and an outline version of what would be contained within the SPD, and set out the parameters that it would contain, which were going to align with the motion. At that stage, the members of that committee hadn't seen the SPD, draft SPD, because it hadn't been prepared. And the reason in part that we progressed so speedily is that there's a deadline for adopting SPDs of the end of June, which has been introduced as part of the new local plan regime, and to try and fit everything in, we've had to progress without having had a draft prepared at that stage. On the 26th of February, circulation draft was sent to the councillors of PTPWG inviting comments or feedback, which one councillor has responded to, and some comments were factored into the draft HMO SPD, which has been attached with the agenda for tonight. So tonight's report is seeking 4 things from the committee. It's for members to note the time constraints for the adoption of SPDs, for members to note the importance of the SPD to fulfilling the motion of the council, to approve the draft HMO SPD for consultation purposes, and to authorise the making of changes in consultation with the chairman of the PTPWG if any minor changes are deemed to be required. From the report that's before you, please note that the consultation period will not be able to commence on if approved, it will not be able to commence on the 23rd of March as planned. There's too much behind the scenes work to make that realistic. It's possibly going to be a week later at worst, but still within the timeline to enable the SPD to be sent back through all the various committees on its way to being adopted before the end of June. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I've got a visiting member. I'll bring him in first. Councillor Whiting, please.
Oh, thank you, Chairman. I'm much obliged. Thank you, Leader. The original motion that I put forward back in October last year, I think coalesced a very clear will of members around the chamber to strengthen the controls on HMO development, in line with so many other authorities around the country. And I thank members again for their support that night. That control, as we know, as has been mentioned, comes in 2 parts, an SPD and an Article 4. And tonight, Willie Chairman, I'm just asking the committee to support the officer's recommendation on page 7 in respect of the SPD element. I'd like to pay particular thanks to Ian for his work in getting it ready, and for sparing time, endless hours talking to me, which is I was really grateful for. I think, Chair, that the SPD will strengthen our position in controlling the development of HMOs. However, it doesn't create any new HMO policy. It relies on existing policies, which it backs up. And I think there are some gaps in our existing policies. Chair, those gaps won't be filled entirely by the Article 4 direction, but could be filled perhaps by a specific HMO planning policy, a route that many other authorities have gone down. Of course, introducing one now in Swale, midway between a Reg 18 and a Reg 19, would not be without any considerable challenge, but it isn't impossible. So, Leader, in asking your committee to support the recommendations, I would also ask that it notes the lack of a specific HMO planning policy and refers this to the Planning Policy and Transportation Working Group, asking it to consider whether such a policy should be created, and if it should, then perhaps how and when that might happen. The additional request is not on the order paper tonight, Leader, but it is in the gift of the committee should members so decide to support it. And it would at least get that particular ball rolling. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of questions. On page 7, and it's also repeated on page 33. Now, the first one was parking, and this isn't just relevant to the paper before us. I think it's relevant to a lot of planning stuff as well. When I do understand that our officers do not, and nor should they, work 24 hours a day. Most areas of the borough, you can squidge in somewhere during daytime hours. The reason that on the few times that I've been pushed for resident parking in Sheerness, the minute I say, yeah, but it's only during the day, it finishes at 6 o'clock at night. Well, it's at night we need a parking scheme because we can't park our cars. And I did forward some photos to a recent planning committee that was looking at a HMO, because yes, the officers have said, yeah, there's adequate parking down there. Well, there was during the day when officers went and checked. But at night, as you would have seen from the photos, it's like a slalom. In the widest street in the whole of Sheerness, they double park overnight. And to get from one end to the other, it is like a slalom going like this. So my point on that is, before saying, yeah, there's not a problem with parking, make sure that the information was taken in the evening and not at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, because it's totally different. And it is in the evening, which Sheerness, I don't doubt other areas as well, have a huge issue in terms of parking. The other point that I wished to raise was on page 21 and over the page on 23, where it says physical works. Such works might be able to occur under the terms of classes, roof extensions, other roof alterations, blah, blah, blah. And then over the page, it says, as part of the set, if we restrict permitted development rights, would that mean that you can't take your roof off, let alone mine next door, in order to do works, because you would need permission to do it, because you wouldn't have that permitted development rights? And I did, when we had the briefing on this, I did raise the issue of, I hesitate to use the word developer, but somebody who was changing to a HMO, not only took their roof off, but next doors as well, with no, but no, not so much as is it okay? And the first they knew about it was when their daughter came round and said, why are you shivering? Don't know, the house just seems to be so cold. And then when said daughter checked, they had no roof. Now the answer from our staff, and also the answer to the other question was, that's the roof. Would it also apply to you taking down my party wall? Because the answer was, oh, well, you'll need to see a solicitor. It's a civil issue. Well, our residents expect all of this sort of stuff to come under SBC. And indeed, in the days before Mags poked her fingers in the pie with building control, this would have all been dealt with by SBC. So roof, walls, blah, 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 would that all then need planning permission before you start making these changes to a HMO? I'm just going to make sure. The other one was on those coloured pictures where you put the output areas, page 27. The highest concentration is obviously Sheerness, and if you look at that very tiny map, all those little black dots there's so many black dots that it's almost a splodge. But it says, if combined, second paragraph from the bottom of page 26, if combined with an adjacent OA to the west, which is one of those that has 4 HMOs, there are 340 blah, blah, blah. Which is the one to the west with the 4 HMOs to the west of Sheerness, which has 39? Because I couldn't see one. So I suppose there's only 2.62 if we add this bit in and we add that bit in. So I wanted a bit more information of how you actually did that, those little bar charts, because there's lies, damned lies, and statistics. And I think, Mr. Chairman, that was all of my points. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, I mean, it appears that you've identified quite clearly that there is crossover between building control and planning, but I'll let Ian come back on the points you've raised.
Thank you, Chairman. Let's do them in order. Firstly, the parking beat surveys that we've referred to. I think I've referred to the Lambeth methodology, which is a sort of an industry standard, but it doesn't need to be done in that way. It could be any of the methodologies could be used. That specifically requires the busiest periods of the day to be established and considered as part of establishing how many parking spaces are available on any given day, and then that's the baseline which is added to as part of any proposals that would cause an uplift in parking. In terms of PD rights and civil matters, I think that's the answer, is that a lot of the stuff you've just mentioned is a civil matter. Planning can't control someone going onto somebody else's property and doing works. You're quite right that residents expect that we can do that, but we absolutely can't because it's outside the remit of planning. We can control developments from when there's a breach of planning control, not when there's a breach of property law, effectively. Party Wall Act is absolutely the way to cover circumstances like that, or presumably the police, because it sounds, from what you described, it sounded like trespass or something to that end, rather than being within the ability of us to control. From a planning perspective, building control wouldn't be involved in that either. Their interest is whether something stands up, not whether it is lawful or not. The permitted development rights, the things that I've mentioned is that they still exist for a dwelling, and actually for a HMO in most cases, that they still have permitted development rights to do your dormers, your extensions and the such like. And in most cases that we see before us from an enforcement perspective is where we have a dormer brought to our attention and someone says this is the first step of it becoming a HMO. And yeah, you're right, but we weren't born yesterday, and we can see that that's a logical step as much as councillors and neighbours can. But the point is it's permitted development, and we can't control permitted development rights for roof extensions and dormers and other such extensions for the whole of the borough. And the way of the system is that they can be put in and then converted to a HMO afterwards. That's the nature of planning, and it's beyond certainly this SPD to control that, and it'd be beyond the Article 4 when that comes too. You're right. In terms of the statistics, the OAs that we've referred to is sort of the lowest, smallest areas within the census data. There's sort of groups of sort of between a handful of properties and 150, I think it was, properties. They're very narrow search areas, and we've plotted the HMOs that we know of through that, and that's how we've identified the areas that are the most concentrated. From the memory, the one was around sort of Marine Parade, Nailmer Road, in that sort of part of Sheerness. And the point I was making there that that was the most concentrated area, where the two OAs, output areas, next to each other there was 7, or it might be 9, within a fairly close proximity within those two OAs, which amounted to a couple of hundred properties. So that was the most intense grouping of HMOs in the borough, and that's why we picked on that one, if that answers the question. Yeah.
Thank you, Ian. Councillor Worcester, please.
Thank you, Chair. Really good document. I thought the data in it was exactly what we've been asking for. for a long time, actually. And I do believe that the data was probably available on SPAL's website, but the website is so vast and it's so difficult to pick out sometimes the data. So having a report like this is really excellent. However, it does throw up some immediate problems. And I believe that the number of HMOs in Sheerness that already are there is twice the amount of any other area that's highlighted in the document. And this should absolutely trigger some form of investigation of how that's been allowed to occur. I'm not a planning specialist. I've read through the document. I find that the way that the cap is looked at is very confusing and will be for residents going out to consultation. I know it will be, putting my other hat on for Sheerness Town Council, asking parishes to comment on things like this, which they already have been commenting on, probably just not using the right language maybe, because again, they are not tending to be planning specialists either. And I do believe that we are on a knife edge in some of these areas. HMOs are absolutely the right housing option for some people. They can be used to support survivors of domestic violence. They can be used to support military members coming out of service and finding their foothold. Prisoners that leave incarceration, then need to find their foothold in the community again to make a decent life for themselves. But it shouldn't be that we've got a document like this with so many HMOs squeezed into a deprived area, and we're expecting that deprived area to then have the same amount of resources as a non-deprived area. It's just not going to happen. In Sheerness, we're already looking at the loss of a GP. It's keeping its number, but it's moving out of the area, which for 40% of households in Sheerness that do not drive are going to be a massive problem even getting to health services. At the last planning meeting I attended, a HMO went through. Everything in this document was highlighted by town councillors and by ward members, because I did it myself, and it made no difference. We asked for that planning application to be deferred on the basis that this work was coming forward, and the planning committee didn't even really bat an eyelid at it. We must make sure whatever documentation is coming forward is actually going to be usable by this council and be helping to inform decisions. Otherwise, it's just a waste of our time putting this documentation forward at all. So I go back to my original question. Looking at the data that this report has provided, fantastic. What are we going to do about the fact that it has highlighted almost double the amount of HMOs being in one of our most deprived wards going forward? Thank you.
Thanks, Chairman. Sort of two elements to that. Firstly, as you've heard, the Article 4 direction would limit the ability to create HMOs without needing planning permission up to, at the moment, a 6-person HMO could be created from a dwelling without needing planning permission. And that's been the case since the mid-2010s, when, probably about 2010, when the permitted development right for change of use to HMOs was introduced. At the moment, it's free rein to turn dwellings into HMOs. The Article 4 would introduce a control, meaning that they need planning permission, borough-wide, not just in Sheerness. That's not what's before you tonight, though. What is this SPD, and the first wing of that is the control, where we're suggesting a 10% limit within 100-metre radius of a site. It's a methodology that is used by other councils close to here, where the methodology is being used, where we know that officers have used their systems, which are very similar to our systems, to be able to establish the existing number of dwellings, the existing number of HMOs, compare the two, add one on, and see if it exceeds the 10% limit. I'm not going to suggest that it's a perfect solution, or that it will address all the concerns that councillors are raising, but it's a step forward relative to any controls that we have at this time. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you.
Can I just come back, Chair, quickly? I completely agree, but one simple action this council could take is saying that until this work is put into place, consultation, actually actioned, can we not put at least a stay on planning to not accept any more HMOs to planning, to allow this work to take effect and allow this council to have the best option in responding to planning applications? And also another step this council could take is in its training. So, for example, I'm going to highlight Sheerness again because it's got the most, and I assume we'll have some more coming forward. We really look at upskilling our towns and parishes, giving them the most access to how they interpret these rules of the CAP and HMOs sitting next to each other and all those sort of things that will mean that wards have the strongest opportunity to represent the facts of their ward because they know their areas best. I know planning sits with lots of other people and the decision is for the whole planning, but we could make some simple steps here to say we recognise this work and we're going to actually take positive steps to make it meaningful work for those people that have held these concerns for a long time. Thank you.
So my answer to that would be an absolute no, unless Ian's going to tell me any different.
For you, Chairman, no, we can't. So many of the HMOs that are created at the moment are created without needing planning permission because there's no Article 4. So it's not that we can say they can't submit a planning application because a planning application isn't even needed in many, many cases. It's only those that are over 6 persons that would need permission in the most part at the moment.
Thank you. Councillor Baldock, please.
Thanks, Chair. The SPD does what we asked it to do. It is focused on what it can do. I'm happy to move all 4 recommendations and incorporate a 5th recommendation covering the points that Councillor Whiting made, namely that we note there is no specific policy and refer that to PTPWG for the consideration of a new policy.
Thank you. Councillor Martin?
Second it.
Thank you, Leader. I won't do that because I think my colleague might do that for you in a second.
Oh, right.
Purely a basis, looking at the report, I think it is a very well written SPD, as ever, from our planning officers. Excellent professionalism, excellent report writing. On page 26, and the map on page 26, the table on page 27, and then the table on page 32, 33 shows one HMO in my ward. Given that HMO has burnt down, and that we know it is burnt down because we ran the crisis response for it, should it be included in the response? I know it is subject to an active planning application for demolition. For reference, that's 25501741/full, which is not yet decided. So I won't preempt that, but at the very least, when we're looking at the delegation, if that decision is made before we approve it, should we change those tables, please?
Thank you. Ian?
That's the case officer for that application. I can probably engineer it so that it's afterwards. I need to pull my finger out. We can do it at the moment. It's lawful uses HMO, and so it's counted. I think if we'd left it out, it wouldn't have told the full picture for where we are at the moment.
Thank you. Councillor Hunt, please.
Thank you. I was pretty much going to say what Councillor Baldock said. I think this is a good start. Obviously, we've got the SPD going through, but it's clear that obviously there's going to be a lot more planning applications coming through for HMOs that we're going to have to deal with, and it's right that we have some policy on that, and especially with the local plan, it's probably a good time. Officers are probably going to think we haven't got time to do it, but it seems to be that if we can do it, then it's worthwhile getting some policy in there to be able to deal with these issues that are being raised and how we look at it going forward. So I'm happy to second Councillor Baldock if no one has done yet.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. So just in terms of the local plan policy, obviously if an application comes in, it would be assessed against the policies within the SPD. So that is still a plan policy. The local plan is a suite of policies. You've got the local plan, you've got neighbourhood plans, SPDs. So you've got that suite of policies. So, you don't always need policies to be repetitious. as you know, you've got the national planning policy, you've got local planning policy. You don't need, and the government are always telling us, as you know, you don't need repetitive policies repeated throughout lots of different documents. As you said, we're midway between, we've just finished Reg 18, moving forward to Reg 19. We would need a steer from members to, which, you're voting on now, to bring forward a development management policy. We don't have an evidence base to show the issues of why we would need an HMO development management policy. We've got evidence showing where they are and how many, but not the issues associated with it. Trying to timetable that in, obviously, is an issue. If you vote, obviously, that's for us to work out. But just to say, you've got the Article 4 coming forward, you've got an SPD coming forward. Those are strong policy guidelines and sort of moving forward. And you've got national policy. You don't need to sort of always layer up lots of different policy going forward. Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks. I understand that, but I mean, we've had SPDs before, and we've had developers argue that it's an SPD and it's only guidance. How strong is it going to be? Because there is some things the things that have been raised, for instance, parking. If we look at altering our parking standards, we could be something that we're adding into it to say that HMOs that we need to be looking at. There's just stronger policies in some areas, I think, that we could do, whether that is a standalone policy that we have to have with HMOs, or if it's put elsewhere that we just bolster up some of the things that we've got in a supplementary planning document and make sure that it sticks. And when those applications do come in, they're absolutely there in policy that is how we're going to deal with them.
Yeah, agreed. So I've got a proposal from Councillor Baldock, seconded by Councillor Hunt. Do you want to, Councillor Martin?
Sorry, Chair, it's just a question based from the officer's response there. It sounds like an indication that perhaps, given that the mainstay of the issue is in one particular parish, based on this report, that perhaps a neighbourhood plan with such a policy might be more appropriate in some ways and mean that the timetable for the local plan would not therefore be impacted and would enable us to continue at the pace required to get that sorted without putting additional pressure on officers, perhaps?
That seems sensible, always sensible.
Yep, that is obviously an option. I mean, neighbourhood plans are designed to deal with locally specific issues that are arisen. Yes, that is an option available.
Thank you. Councillor Baldock.
Yeah, just in response to that, neighbourhood plans are not quick, as I'm sure Councillor Martin knows. And yeah, I think you'd be looking at least 5 years if everything went fairly swimmingly. So I think I'd rather we stick with our amendment.
Okay, I've got Councillor Worcester, then Councillor Harrison. We'll go to the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Just thought I'd let Councillor Martin know that in the response to the Regulation 18 consultation was floated by Sheerness Town Council to look at a Sheppey-wide neighbourhood plan for the area. Because we've seen the good work done by Faversham. But obviously costing is a massive effect, especially when you're looking at deprived areas and looking at the fact that it's people's precept that you're going to be using for the majority of that work to be done. So it's definitely not an easy argument. Even if we agreed it tomorrow, we wouldn't be able to do that. The finding the funding for that would be an increasingly difficult task for parishes. Thank you.
Thank you, and good luck on a Sheppey-wide one. Just thinking out loud. Councillor Harrison.
Thanks, Chair. I spoke before the proposal was put on the floor, which I'll be voting against because I accept the argument from the officers regarding yet another document and the timeframes and all the rest of it. And whilst officers do their best, as I said earlier, I do not expect them to be working 24/7. So I think we accept what we've got before us, the SPD, and then if there's any tweaks going down the lane, we look at other ways of doing it rather than, oh yeah, we need another policy document, because everything just gets held up. Let's kick it down the road a bit more. So I shall be voting against the proposal on the floor.
Thank you, Councillor Gold.
Thank you. I'm just not very clear what the proposal actually is adding here. If it's a supplementary policy document, and then we're then asking for an extra policy in the in the local plan, it doesn't seem to add very much. So I'm just very unclear as to what we are actually adding. If I've even understood.
Thank you, Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick comment. I think, from my limited understanding of it, I think the suggestion actually just will help tighten up and assist with the decision making. In terms of Councillor Martin's comment about the neighbourhood plan, I do understand that. I get that, and there is some bit of merit to it. Where I'm not convinced there is on the hypothetical of wards, and take mine and Merston, Tennant Linstead and Merston on Great East Hall, when you have a neighbourhood plan potentially in, say, Merston, and a road that then is shared up to the parish boundary in Tenham, and you can have a HMO on one side, but you can't have it on HMO on the other side because the neighbourhood plan, that is going to get really confusing. So I think actually a borough-wide policy on that would be more advantageous, but I do understand the sentiment behind it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Palmer.
Yeah, Councillor Gould raised the concern about the addition, and I'd just like to be clear of what the wording actually says, because I'm not too sure if it's strong enough, if it's just going to look at it, but we need to ask for a policy to be introduced via the committee.
Yeah, the aim was. Oh well, I'll let Councillor Baldock say it was to take it back to PTP.
Thank you, Chair. The amendment is to refer it to PTPWG to look at the creation of a policy. If it comes clear to PTPWG that is not appropriate, then obviously it can decide not to. But it can also gather the information and make the consideration on what sort of policy it would be. So it's really just giving PTPWG the opportunity to explore the possibility of a specific policy and how we would go about framing that.
Okay, right. We'll vote on the amendment first, I think. So, are we clear on that? Councillor Hunt, sorry.
Can we just, from officers, just get clarification on an SPD being guidance, or is it actually policy?
Yeah, it is policy, so it's part of your suite. It's the development plan. I keep that say is your local plan, your SPDs, your neighbourhood plans. Planning applications are then assessed against all of those policy documents. I mean, your example of developers arguing against an SPD, as you know, no offence to developers, they will argue against a policy in any document. The MPPF, or not all of them, sorry, going down. That's their role in some instances. So yes, it is still, it's a document, it's guidance. It gives that finer sort of grain level of detail to guide developments. And when Ian's team get applications, they will use that SPD to assess those applications for HMOs. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bowen.
Sorry, I'm still confused because we just said it was asked whether it actually is policy, and the response seemed to indicate that it started off it was, but then as you finished, then it then became guidance. So I'm still not quite there. Is it actually policy or guidance?
Yes, it's policy.
Right.
Thank you. Right, so first of all then on the amendment, those in favour of the amendment? Those... Sorry, I'll let you count first. Those against? Abstentions? So that's carried. 9, 4 and 2 abstentions. Thank you, members. Right, could I have a proposer then for all those 5?
Opposed.
Thank you, Councillor Baldock. Seconded by Councillor Charles Gibson. Those in favour? That's unanimous, members. Thank you very much. We now move on to agenda item 8, which is the housing payments policy. And this one, I think, is in the hands of Zoe, who is online.
Thank you, Chair, and apologies for being online.
Don't apologise, I'm glad you are.
The Council has administered a discretionary housing payment scheme since 2001, allowing it to top up any shortfall between housing benefit or universal credit housing costs and rent on a discretionary basis. The government plans to bring this scheme together with the Household Support Fund with effect from the 1st of April 2026 as a crisis and resilience fund. The government has agreed that districts can continue to receive a Housing Payments Fund grant for swell. This is £262,000, equivalent to the former discretionary housing payment funding. A housing payments policy is required for the new fund. This is based on the former DHP policy, and it will allow the new scheme to be administered along the same lines. This report provides details of the changes and a background to the policy. The policy has been written in conjunction with the housing team to ensure it covers the Renters' Rights Act, which comes in from May this year. Help to those in need is awarded after consultation with the housing team. This helps people to stay in their current accommodation or to move to more suitable accommodation, reducing the burden on temporary accommodation. I welcome any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Baldock, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's not a question. Just first an observation. It's a shame that a government that is supposed to be helping the least well off hasn't increased the funding for this year, given that the cost of renting is going up. So that's a bit of a shame. But apart from that, I think it's absolutely essential we adopt the housing payments policy. So I'm happy to move that.
Thank you. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Wise, thank you. Oh, Councillor Bonney?
That's not on this one. Sorry, I misread.
Oh, sorry. Okay, that's fine. So, members, anybody like to speak to this then? Councillor Jays?
Thank you, Chair. Can I just check this is cost neutral to the council because we get a grant? Obviously, it costs us through staff time, but is it cost neutral other than that?
It should be, but I'll defer to Zoe on that one.
It's cost neutral. We can decide to top the funding up. So we could decide we wanted to award more funding, but over the past few years, the budget has lasted over the year. We work with housing, and so it hasn't cost us anything.
Thank you. Members, I'll take this one to the vote then, please. Those in favour? And that just happens to be unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you, Zoe. I'm glad you are online because I couldn't have done it without you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Members, we move on to agenda item 9. And this one is a local plan review, growth strategy and sites for allocation.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. So the report before you comes at a critical point in progressing the Council's local plan review. As part of agreeing the latest version of the Council's local development scheme, the formal document for setting out the Council's approach to plan making, it was agreed to carry out a Regulation 19 local plan consultation in the summer of this year and to submit the plan for examination by the end of December. This is the deadline set by the government for submitting the plan under the current, now known as legacy plan making system. As part of discussing the local development scheme, the option of not submitting the plan under the current system was discounted by members. It's essential now that members make recommendations for the matters in the report so that it will allow enough time for officers to commence drafting the Regulation 19 document and to complete key whole plan evidences like transport modelling, air quality and the plan sustainability appraisal. Failure to agree the recommendations in this report will likely result in the council being unable to complete a local plan under the current system. Whilst the new plan making system is emerging from the government, any local plan developed under that system will likely be a matter for detailed consideration after the proposed local government reorganisation. So just to summarise, the two recommendations in the report are to ask members to recommend to full council a preferred growth strategy for drafting of the Regulation 19 local plan, and members are also asked to recommend to full council the non-strategic sites that are set out in the appendices 1 to 6 of this report. Thank you, Chair.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. Not really, but can we discuss both recommendations separately? Take one in order. Otherwise, I think it could get really messy and we would lose the frame of what we're discussing. I think it would make debate a lot clearer.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. Thank you. Councillor Harrison, please.
Thanks, Chair. Mine's a question because when I read this, I just thought, what brain-dead idiot put in an application that we gave an indicative refusal for and then spent shed loads of money defending said refusal at a planning inquiry?
Thank you. I don't think officers can answer. No. I think we're in a better place than that. Thank you. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Leader. I'm actually going to make a proposal. Much as I'd normally agree with officers on most things when they come forward, I actually think the PTPWG have got this one wrong. I think option 6, essentially putting the vast majority in the east of the borough, would not pass full council. I do not think my residents would put up with it, frankly, because let's be very honest, and you can't accuse me of being a NIMBY for a start after last night, thank you very much, anybody. Where that housing would end up would be Watling Ward. We've got 2,500 houses that were approved last night, 500 of which in Bourton and Courtney I fully accept, Councillor Gould, just to be very clear. We've already had since 2019 1,000 built with another 900 due to be built that have already got permission. The people will not put up with it. I think option 4 was fair. It spreads it across the borough. It then also gives us the opportunity to take out those 2 sites in Highstead, which we have already said as a planning committee we would not like to happen and have spent a small fortune saying we do not want to happen. And my other suggestion would be that we then ask PTPWG to have a look again at those additional site allocations, so that you've got the 2,500 either end of the borough, and in my view you take the 2 Highstead Park ones out and you put the next one in that was on the list. Relatively quick decision, I think, for PTPWG to make, and that's the steer we give, and that's something which I think could pass at full council and could be a viable local plan. I do not think putting the vast majority in Faversham and its surrounds will be a viable local plan or get the support of members or the public.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Bonney online I'm going to bring in, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. I was going to speak to the second recommendation, which talks about including appendices 1 to 6, and I do remember the discussion at the local plan working group, and that wasn't to include the large housing allocations. But if you look in Appendix 2, I think it's pages 9 and 10, Highstead Park is included in there. And I think that conflicts with what was discussed and agreed. And I don't think I wanted to alert members to what you're agreeing there. It seems mad to go and defend those schemes and then include them in the appendices here.
Thank you. I wasn't at that meeting, but I know there's a member in the room who's chairing that meeting, and I'm going to bring him in ahead of other speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm firstly very happy to second Councillor Martin's proposal. That is exactly what we agreed. We agreed 2 strategic sites in the east of the borough. and which I did not agree with. Let the record show I said we were wrong then, and I maintain we are wrong now. And it was proposed by that committee and voted on by a majority, again, not including myself, that we include a sizable allocation of 2,500 from Highstead, both sites, as potential build-out in that 15-year period. We discussed it at length. It was against officer recommendation, and members still voted for it. That is why I support Councillor Martin's proposal that we not do that, because it was a bad idea at the time. It remains a bad idea.
Yeah, I'm just going to bring our planning team in.
I mean, if I can come in, Councillor Gibson is correct in his interpretation of the discussion there. But I think the reason why the matter was raised was the concerns that if we didn't allow for a potential Highstead being granted by the Secretary of State, that we'd be over-allocating non-strategic sites. So that was the concern there, that we needed to factor in a potential scenario there. So yeah, that's why it's in what's listed as the non-strategic site. So it's not part of our strategic growth options. You've got to bear in mind, Highstead is a very large scheme. Schemes of that nature can take very long periods of time to start building out. So the reality is it's not a one-stop fix-it-all approach for the council in terms of plan making. That's why we've only got 2,000 to 2,500 dwellings potential from that site should it go into the plan, because there's so much mitigation, particularly on the southern parcel, that will delay the actual build out of dwellings. So that's the interpretation, and I think that's reflected in the minutes that the concern was that by not allowing for a potential Secretary of State granting of those schemes, and we'd be over allocating on non-strategic sites. Thank you.
Thank you. And also, just on the proposed amendment, I don't think we would have time for it to go back to PTPWG to discuss, to then come back, because of as we've explained numerous times, about the short timescale to be getting to the Reg 19 and then to submit by the end of the year. We need to be getting on with evidence base, like the transport modelling and the air quality, basically the minute tonight finishes and full council on the 1st of April. So to then go back to PTP, to come back to PNR, to go to full council again, is not feasible, I would recommend. Thank you. But obviously it's up to you as members to make that decision.
Thank you.
So we do need to, we have an amendment on the table, which I think has been seconded twice. You've also heard now from the officer that in its current form, it may not be achievable. So through you, Chair, the question would be, does that amendment still stand as is, or is there the alternative, which is to remove it goes to PTPWG and it is as it is, but I think we need to focus on the amendment first and clear that up before we start talking on other things. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Martin.
Well, given that it will have to be a change to the amendment based on the officer advice, I think it is a case that we change the growth option from 6 to option 4.
Thank you. Have we got a seconder for that? Councillor Harrison. Thank you. Councillor Baldock.
Yes, to actually talk about what happened at PTPWG, and I find it quite amazing, having been lectured at about 3 of the 4 last meetings from Councillor Martin and Gibson, how we should listen to our working groups and how we should accept the recommendations of working groups, and now to see them both challenging the recommendations of a working group, one of which they chair, is quite ironic. There were many reasons discussed at PTPWG for this particular growth strategy. It's the one that is most enables the council to meet its strategic objectives in terms of affordable housing. When we looked at the plans and the graphs in PTPWG over a number of years, we have seen that it gets the best return. The east of the borough gets the best return on all of our options. That's partly of what helped us in PTP consider that the best option. There's also the problem that there has been a historic imbalance away from Faversham. Now, I know that Faversham's getting a lot of building, but so are we. And we've still got loads in the pipeline in this end of the borough. We've still got hundreds of houses in Wade. We've got nearly 1,000 to come through at Kemsley. There's 1,200 to come through on the island. So I know Faversham's feeling pain. We've been feeling it for about a decade. And this balanced it up a little more so that over the future, given in mind what's already in the pipeline for the rest of the borough, it was a more balanced approach. So that's why we, detail at length, and not just once, but several times now, have made this strategic recommendation. We would have had it on the table a year and a half ago. That's when it was discussed previously, and it was again go to full council for this strategic option. So I really feel that if we change that growth strategy after PTP have done all the work on it, we are not going to be in a position to legitimately support a different growth strategy. So I oppose the amendment. I think we have to stick to this recommendation. You can't polish a turd, but you can at least put it in a biodegradable dog bag.
I'm not sure I'd put it in those eloquent terms, but there we go. Anybody else want to speak to the amendment? Councillor Hunt.
Thank you. Again, I have to agree with Councillor Baldock. I'm trying not to do this too much. But it's right that a lot of time has been taken as PTPWG have got all the details in front of them to look at that and make that decision to come up with the best thing. I think with the local plan, over all the years I've dealt with them, you're never going to get everyone to agree it. If we go for option 4, there'll be other people that think it shouldn't be there, and we can't make these decisions as these committees. It has to go forward as it is to a full council. Unfortunately, you only need 50% of the council plus one to be able to get that through. It all depends how that's going to work at the time. But if you don't get this one doesn't go forward, there'll be another one that loads more people don't like that one either. Really, nobody wants any local plan to be going forward. We don't want to be saying where housing's got to go, but we've got to. And this is what's come up as a recommendation, and that's what should be going forward.
Thank you. Stuart.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just provide a little bit of clarity on the affordable housing matter that's been raised? So we have a whole plan viability assessment, which is one of the evidence bases that supports the development of the local plan, and looks at the viability of development across the whole of the borough. So it splits it into 3. It looks at the east, so primarily Faversham. It looks at Sittingbourne and the Isle of Sheppey. And where it is true that Faversham area is more viable than Sittingbourne and Sheppey, the conclusions, particularly from the whole plan viability on affordable housing, is that 30% affordable housing on greenfield sites can be achieved across the whole of the borough. So regardless whether it's East, Sittingbourne or the Isle. Just to provide that clarity, and that policy approach was what went into our Regulation 18 consultation that's just closed, and is part of what's being tested through the local plan drafting.
Thank you. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Chairman. Seem to be going round and round circles with this, and on this particular subject, and Councillor Harrison will be even longer on this and us for many, many years on this version and previous versions of the local plan. I remember similar conversations back whenever it was 2014-ish. Perhaps. Councillor, I'm torn on it at this point. I agree. It's almost, we have a working group who's looked at the data and the evidence and come up with a proposal from that. And as such, we've put the trust into that group to come up with that. So I do take the point of that Councillor Baldock says of actually we've empowered them to do that. So why go against that at this point? But then we go on the flip side, and I've said this a number of times in the past, we seem to be in this yo-yo position of several years ago it was that part of the borough. Now we want to balance up on this part of the borough. So in a few years' time, we're going to be back to that part of the borough because we're going to keep doing that all the time. If somebody doesn't have the guts to actually say going forward, right, we want to balance this out across the borough. So we've got the opportunity potentially to balance this out across the borough with maybe option 4. But unless we take that bold step to say we're going to set that standard and we'll work a future across that as well, we're never going to get that balance because it's always going to be on either end of the borough. And we're also going to stay very parochial in our wards. So the Faversham side of the borough, no doubt, they don't like option 6. Sittingbourne side of the borough do like option 6. And when it goes to full council, it's the numbers game, and it will be not necessarily on the data, it'll be on where you live. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Speed.
Thank you, Chairman. In Appendix 4, which was the housing sites for allocation discussed at the last PTPWG, the bobbing site was listed as not proposed. However, that application is coming before the Planning Committee on the 26th of March with an officer recommendation to grant permission. So assuming members vote with the officer's recommendation, then surely that site should be included. Therefore, to me, option 4 makes more sense, strategic sites in the east and the west. I'd like to remind members that PTPWG only decided on option 6 by 1 vote, so it was not exactly a unanimous decision. So I see no reason why we shouldn't change from option 6 to option 4.
Point of order, Chairman. I think we have to be very careful when we start talking about live applications, especially ones that are due to come before the committee in a very short period of time. When we're discussing strategic allocations, the two have to be kept in separate rooms. Otherwise, there is clear indication that people are predetermined.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison. Councillor Gold first, then Councillor Harrison.
Thank you. Just going back to option 6, it says that the site that was approved yesterday, and then one or more large further strategic sites. I thought that the discussion at PTWG was about looking at many of the smaller sites around Faversham, rather than putting it all in the one big site, which this paper appears to imply. So I just wanted to just be sure that option 6 was actually what we, by however many votes it was, approved at the PTWG, that it wasn't just 2 big strategic sites in Faversham, but it was an upper cap of the number of houses, and then any sites in smaller sites around Faversham would be taking houses off the second large strategic site, which is really basically the one to the north of the A2 going all the way out to halfway through my borough and my ward.
Stuart?
Yeah, so it's unlike non-strategic site allocations, choosing a strategic growth approach is somewhat more complex and needs to be more evidence-driven. So the report that went to the working group back in January set out live applications that would align with the growth options, and members were given the option to nominate those sites if they chose to, and they didn't. So the process now is that we go through our sustainability appraisal, we look at all the sites that are in the HELA and how they've been assessed to determine what are the most suitable against the growth option to then put in the plan for the growth strategy, if that makes sense. So at this stage, because there's no sites were chosen against the growth option, it's for the evidence-based led sustainability appraisal to finally determine what will be the best cluster of sites to come forward.
Yeah, John.
Thank you. So just to clarify the conversation at PTPWG, there were 2 elements to it. So the growth option, as Stuart just outlined, is the strategic sites, so the broad locations. We then moved on to looking at individual sites for the balance of numbers that would be needed So once you take into account the numbers in the strategic allocation, there's then still a balance of housing need. And when we were looking at individual sites, that was to make up that gap effectively. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Lloyd. We can, you've got to actually say, right, from now, this is a new local plan. What's been before has gone. If we'd have pulled our finger out, we'd have had a new local plan by now, but we faffed about, argued about this. Oh, no, this side want that side want that. Oh, depends who rocks up at a meeting and votes, depends which way it goes. You know, we could do that for another 3 years until we're no longer here, until that person up there says, I'll do it for you, which was a suggestion at one point by somebody in this room. We are where we are. Going forward, it needs to be balanced. And that is why I was one of the 2 people who seconded, I don't know who got written down, option 4. And, you know, normally I would say, look, what's the point of having a working group? But my colleague who sits on the working group, who, you know, Light has gone on holiday, did report back to me on this. So I did get his take, his black and white take, because, you know, there's no colour there. I did get his black and white take, and I thought, yeah, okay. So I'm supporting option 4. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Baldock.
Yeah, one of the many points that were made during the discussion that led to option 6 getting support was that there may still be the danger of, and let's face it, the proposal is basically supporting the garden village at Bobbing. We could potentially have a garden village at Bobbing. We could have the garden village at the Duchy, and we could have, if we lose the Highstead development, North Merston coming, the Merston Bapchild Tenham coming through. You are then closing off both ends of our industrial estate. You're closing both ends off of Sittingbourne at the same time. That would be absolute chaos and is not sensible future planning. Also, the amount of chaos that we've already seen on the A249 would be exacerbated considerably by a 2,500 dwelling in Bobbing. You've got all the traffic chaos caused by 700 in Baldon. This is at a crux traffic junction, A249, and it would absolutely kill Sheppey again. Sheppey is waiting to be recovering from the chaos of the Grovehurst roundabout. Having this snarl up the 249 again, and for 2,500 houses, you're not talking 1, 2 years, 18 months, you're talking about 10 years. That is basically snarling up the island for 10 years, as well as the impact it will have on Sittingbourne, potentially in conjunction with Merston. So I think it's very easy to say we don't want it. We've taken enough in Faversham. We don't want any more. But this has such a impact on the whole of the west of the borough and on the island. I think we have to look at the bigger picture here, and we are potentially heading towards utter gridlock for Swale if we're not careful.
Thank you. Councillor Bonney.
Thank you. I'd like to sort of reflect as well what happened in my committee recently, where we had Homes England in, and we already have the largest strategic major housing site in Swale, which has now, by government, failed to deliver.
Sorry, Councillor Bonney, I'm not hearing you very well. Can you either go closer to the microphone or adjust your volume? That's better, thank you.
Yeah. So,
no, I've lost you again. No, you keep falling out. Okay, I'm going to move on to Councillor Palmer. I'll come back to you in a second. Councillor Palmer.
Yeah, thank you. I think there's the 6 options there that are really not palatable to anyone, but I feel option 6, for some of the reasons that Councillor Baldock said, it will bring chaos to the Isle of Sheppey if you went for option 4, and it would bring chaos to the western side of Sittingbourne. And I think the only viable option, and I think officers really need this direction now to move to get the local plan through on time. Otherwise, if we kick it down the road again, we're going to finish up having to put even more development up. So I don't think I could support the amendment as it is, but I will listen to the arguments, but I don't feel I can support that amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bonney?
I'm back.
That's better, yeah, loud and clear.
Yeah, all right. Okay. Yeah, so obviously I was at the local plan Wallace Transportation Working Group, but also we had Homes England on my committee, and it's really frustrating where we've made large allocations over 2 local plans now, and the government's own agency has failed to deliver on a major site in terms of housing, and that has caused an enormous repercussion around the whole of Swale because it's impacted our 5-year supply. And when we look forwards, we got to think what is deliverable and where have we got deficits and where have we got ramifications from what I would call the ghosts of developments past. So the failure to deliver a new secondary school in northwest Sittingbourne. We've got this constant traffic issue around the A249 that really has fundamentally hit residents and businesses in and around Sittingbourne and Sittingbourne town centre. And I find it really, we are between a rock and a hard place. We found out today that Highstead Park, the inspector is not going to be setting off her report to the Secretary of State until at least June. So we have to continue. But we need to continue with something that is deliverable. And for years, we have had the invisible thread of the Thames Gateway that separated between Sittingbourne and it fell down where just this side of Tenham. And so we piled into Sittingbourne and into Sheppey a ton of development over the last 2 decades. And I hate to see, I voted against last night, Duchy, but we're in a precarious situation. And I don't think we should go back on the recommendation and the discussions that were had at the working group. Otherwise, quite frankly, might as well scrap the working group.
Thank you. Councillor Baldock?
I think there's just one other thing to bear in mind, given that that was the view of PTPWG, based on all the evidence. If we change it tonight, do you really think that's going to get through full council? Do you really think this option is going to get, option 4 or option 2 is going to get through full council? Because then we'd be back really in a mess. Because I don't think there is a cat in hell's chance of number 2 getting through full council. If you think that it might do, then fine. But look at the numbers, and I think you will find ourselves in a really awkward position where we actually vote against this recommendation, if it's number 2, at full council, and end up not being able to meet the timetable.
Thank you. So the amendment on the floor was for growth option 4, proposed by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Harrison. Those in favour?
So can you just do it again?
Oh.
Yeah, no, we got it. Okay.
Those against? Abstentions? So that amendment is carried, members. Thank you. And now on the second part, which is to recommend to full council and non-strategic sites.
Sorry, Chair, we have got to, that was an amendment, we've still got to discuss the full recommendation, yeah.
Yes, good point, thank you. So we're back to the substantive, Councillor Baldock.
Well, I'll be voting against this because I don't think it's got a chance of getting through in this state now, and I think we have left ourselves in a position where we've not going to get a Regulation 19 that will have public support. I can't recommend to full council a preferred growth strategy that includes the Bobbing Garden Village, and that, let's make it clear, that's what people are going to be that's what people are voting on now. So I will be asking for a recorded vote on this.
Thank you. Councillor Palmer?
I agree with what Councillor Baldock's just said. So rather than waffle on, I'll just keep it nice and short, and I support his call for a recorded vote.
Thank you. Agreed. Right. Okay. So, Councillor Gibson.
I want to do a number of things. Firstly, apologise to officers in general for this whole process. But secondly, to ask the question about what we have just done means for this secondary stage, i.e. we have allocated 1,000 more houses on a strategic site than we previously had. So what does that require us to do on the non-strategic site, or allow us to do, depending on your point of view, on the non-strategic sites that we're now discussing?
Well, so moving on to the non-strategic sites, I think there's some appetite in the room here to remove the 2,000 dwellings from the High Stead. So even though option 4 would increase it by 1,000, taking out High Stead would actually bring us down by 1,000. So we would still be within our target and our buffer zone, but it'd be a lot tighter, which means we couldn't afford to remove it any other non-strategic sites, if that makes sense to members.
That's a great help, and I'm comfortable with that maths.
Thank you. Councillor Whiting.
Yeah, I'm very grateful. And just again, it's a local issue, but it has that wider implication. And Councillor Bonney referred to it earlier, the land at Queenborough and Queenborough and Rushenden, which Homes England have singularly failed to develop. They're now proposing actually reducing the number of homes on that site from 1,000 to 500. But given what Stuart has just said about how tight the housing numbers are now, losing that further 500 from Queenborough and Halfway, which will need to be factored into the change that the committee has just suggested it made, I think will really severely impact our ability to have a valid 5-year land supply for the first 2 or 3 years at least of the new plan. And that's got to be a serious concern. Now, I know there are moves afoot, and I'll be talking to the Chief Executive at Homes England about this as well, and I'm sure others will be, to sort this out, to get them to develop what they said they were going to. But reducing that further, on top of the change that has just been, changes that are being suggested now, against all the evidence that we discussed at the working group, I must say. So I had a question at the end of all that, which is, the proposal tonight was based on the evidence that had been considered by the working group. And that evidence was evidence that we felt would stand up at examination moving forward, which all of this will have to do at some point. How does a decision on the hoof tonight to go against that decision that was made in accordance with the evidence that the working group had, how does that risk, what risk is there attached now to that change moving forward when the plan goes to examination, if full council was minded to agree the change? Thank you.
So I think there's 3 elements there. Firstly, so with growth option 4, you get an extra 1,000 in terms of your growth approach. But removing Highstead would remove 2,000, so you'd lose 1,000 from the overall figures that were presented to Policy and Resources tonight. So those original figures met the target in terms of the overall numbers game, let's say, plus had 1,000 there. So the loss of 1,000 tonight would put us bang on that original 5% buffer. But as Councillor Whiting rightly has stated, the Queenborough and Rushenden sites are likely, when they give us formal evidence through plan drafting, coming at a lower figure than what we've had previously allocated for them. So that is why we have this 5% buffer that's still remaining there to address matters like that. So it's still to be finalised through the examination, the Queenborough and Rushenden sites, but if they do go down to a lower figure, then we have that actual reserve now. But as I keep saying to members, that's just a collection of 3 sites. So we have to be very careful not to take any sites out if we're going to remove the Highstead approach. That makes sense. And then just in terms of the 5-year housing land supply, due to the complex nature of the Queenborough and Rushenden sites, should they become allocated and into adopted plan, it's highly unlikely they're going to contribute to a 5-year supply in the first few years of a plan period. So just for members who aren't fully versant with local plan making, one of the tests of the local plan through its examination is to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply at the point of adoption. So as part of the kind of high level work I've been doing on the calculations, Queenborough and Rushenden aren't required for that element of the examination. So I think there was a third question.
It was on the risk of examination. Yes. So I think we would have evidence to support option 4 at examination. Obviously, it's a sustainable option because you're spreading development sustainably across the borough, which would then therefore be providing that development across the borough in a sustainable manner. So I think as officers, we would be confident that, yes, we would have the evidence to support that. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, I'm just going to adjourn for 10 minutes, please. Thank you. Right, thank you, members. We reconvene, and it's 8:35. Thank you.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. I know we are still debating the first recommendation, but my query is the second recommendation is a list of sites recommended by PTPWG. Those were sites recommended to meet a different strategy to the one that to the amended outcome, to the amended motion. Now, when we were recommending those sites, a lot of sites were not recommended because there was a feeling that Faversham had taken its share. So we said no to a load of allocations in Faversham. This list of allocated sites no longer is appropriate for a different growth strategy, and we would need to go through all the allocations again to consider them in the light of a different growth strategy. I really don't see how we can just take the ones that were recommended by PTP without going through the others now in the light of a different growth strategy.
Thank you. Councillor Gibson.
I'm afraid my recollection of the evening is slightly different to that, in that we agreed that we would delegate to officers and myself going back to the committee how we distributed the 4,000 across Faversham. We didn't discuss in detail or allocate or not allocate any of the Faversham houses from the Heller, and the site proposals have come forward with 3 sites. So Faversham, on top of the strategic site it is taking, is also taking 3 sites of a housing contribution, not an enormously numerate one, but a housing contribution nonetheless on 3 sites. But that is not on the basis of having ruled out a number at PTPWG. That is not a process we went through, and that did not happen.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, but it absolutely did. Where it was said on several times, Faversham have taken enough. I think Stuart's got his hand up.
Stuart.
Yeah, can I just draw members' attention to the growth options again? So if you notice, particularly in terms of option 4 and 6, there's a slash after the growth option which says settlement hierarchy hybrid. So the purpose of that is that the residual need would be against the settlement hierarchy for the whole of the borough. So of the non-strategic sites, the principle of that is to seek to allocate the majority of them against the higher tier settlements. So regardless of whether it's option 6 or 4, the approach is based on what the balance of residual need is. So we'll still be seeking as much as we can on Cittibourne, then the Isle and Faversham, after it's had its growth element taken on board. So the point I'm trying to make is that the selection non-strategic sites are appropriate regardless whether it's option 6 or 4, because it's against the settlement hierarchy.
Thank you. And given the fact that we agreed at the start, and I certainly did as chair, to say that we'd take them separately, I think that's what I still intend to do. So those 2 separate recommendations. Thank you. So, Councillor Jays.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask some questions on some of the sites, please? Yeah? Oh, it's still in strategy.
Is on recommendation 1?
No, I'll wait for 2 then.
Thank you. Councillor Worcester.
Sorry, Chair. I'm trying to follow the conversation as it goes. I didn't sit in the working group. I've been following the working group's work as long with everybody else. Is there no way we can seek clarity on, because personally, I like working groups, and I think members put an awful lot of hard work into those working groups. And what I thought was going to happen at the meeting is now not happening at this meeting. And I'm very concerned. If one of the working groups says, actually, we need to go back and relook at those allocation of sites because it was based on one, and then another member of the working group is saying that's not the case, I don't understand how their members can make a decision based on those site allocations, based on the information that we're being given at the meeting. Because we've got one story and then something else. Is there any way we can seek clarification on these site allocations? Are we settled with these site allocations? Because the other comment I've got against site allocations is I want to thank officers for some of the site allocations that have gone in for Sheerness, actually. Maybe that's for the different
that's recommendation 2.
Can we any way of seeking clarification on that point, Chair, of what?
We'll look at that when we come to recommendation 2. Okay, so recommendation 1 as amended. I've got proposed by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Harrison, and we want a recorded vote.
Is there three supported?
Yes, there was, yeah. Okay, Councillor Baldock.
Against.
Councillor Bowen.
For.
Councillor Charles Gibson. Councillor Tim Gibson, 4. Alistair Gold. Councillor Gold, sorry.
4.
Councillor Harrison. Councillor Hunt.
Against.
Councillor Jays.
Against.
Councillor Last. Councillor Ben Martin. The only Martin. Councillor Chapman.
Against.
Councillor Palmer.
Against.
Councillor Speed.
For.
Councillor Wise.
4.
And Councillor Worcester.
Against.
That's 9 for, 6 against, so that's carried. Thank you, members. Now we're going to the second recommendation. Councillor Baldock, please.
I formally request that we actually go through every allocation and consider it in line of this new strategic growth strategy. There were sites that were ruled out that should come back now, and I really don't see how we can allocate sites to a new strategy. I hear what the officers say, but that's on numbers. We were making decisions on the basis of a specific strategy. I voted for things that I wouldn't otherwise have voted for. I voted against things I might otherwise have supported. We need to think about things like Winterbourne Fields now. Is that an alternative? There is a whole different approach to these sites that we have not considered. I don't think it's sound, but we just fiddle around with figures that were picked for a different strategy. So I think we need to do our work properly, and this is not an appropriate way forward.
I think there was a proposal there which I would second.
Yeah, you could do if you just wait your turn, because I had Councillor Hunt's hand up first. Thank you. Councillor Hunt.
Thank you. I agree. I sort of agree. I don't agree that we can do that tonight. There is a lot of information that we need to be able to go through those allocations and be able to decide on that. If this committee has now decided that it should be a different option, I think it should be going back to PTPWG to do that work, to be able to come back again. And that is the only way you can do it. You cannot do it tonight. It needs that information to go through. And I know that officers are going to say they haven't got time to do that. This committee's just decided to go for a different option. So that's the timetable out the window.
Okay, so if that's coming forward as a formal amendment, we need the officer advice whether that's doable or not. Yes, you can.
Thank you, Chair. We would have the same timetabling issue going back to PTP with this as we expressed previously. So the modelling that we need to begin in order to launch the Reg 19 needs to take into account the non-strategic site allocations. Whilst there is a PTP at the end of April, we would then need to come back to a PNR. And we can do extraordinaries, of course, but the timetable is that tight that to prepare papers for PTP, to prepare papers for PNR, it's our view that we wouldn't then be able to meet the submission deadline in order to go in under the current NPPF, which is now being called the legacy NPPF.
If I can come in, it's not so much that we wouldn't be able to meet the deadline. The target is to get out to a Reg 19 consultation towards the middle of the summer, so mid-July to end of July. Effectively, going back to to the working group and then coming back to PNR and then full council could potentially delay things by 2 months to go through that cycle, maybe less if we use extraordinaries. We still have to write the papers and produce all the reports and so forth. So the reality is a summer consultation will be gone and it'll be an autumn consultation. Other local authorities that have been under this kind of time pressure to accomplish like an autumn consultation on the Reg 19, what they've asked when they've taken the Reg 19 to full council for decision making is delegated authority to submit the Reg 19 after the consultation rather than taking it back through its committee chair. So effectively, agreeing to a Reg 19 would also mean agreeing to a submission for examination. There would not be the time to take the feedback from the Reg 19 consultation to the working group, to PNR and to full council. So if the decision tonight is to go back a step to the working group, that's the only option we have now, is to basically officers to request delegated authority when we come to do the Reg 19 consultation to also submit for examination. If members aren't mindful to that option, then effectively the timetable is broken on tonight's decision.
Thank you, Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Chair, and thank the officer for the comments there. I'm going to throw something out there for a second, and it would probably be not possible, given the conversation this evening and the fact that both at PTPWG, we've seen it here, one vote, couple of votes either side. It is so close on this that actually if it were to go back to full council, it could equally be as viable to say, actually, no, I'm putting an option 6 back on there, and you're going, oh, no. Is it the work that's been done to get to the current documentation? Is it possible to almost cover both bases? That it's either, I'm not sensing there's much other than a 4 or a 6, actually. So is it possible to do the work for both? And in doing so, obviously, you can have extraordinary meetings. And I agree, PTPWG should look at the data and work to that. We would then need to have, I would suggest, an extraordinary PNR committee. We could, and looking at the Chief Executive Monitor Officer on this, if push came to shove, could this go to an urgent decisions committee rather than full council? Not ideal, I accept, but... Or it'd been an extraordinary council. Thank you.
So my view is I think not, for the simple reason, there are 2 reasons. One, this is something that we have time to arrange an urgent full council. And even if, I think the other issue is that there is something that, because it affects all wards, there could it would be a challenge, and I think it would be open to challenge, because in effect, what would stop us having a full council? It isn't really an urgent decision, in that the worst thing that can happen is we don't meet our own timetable. There is an argument that we have not met our own timetable for the last 3 years. So I think we would struggle to suggest that the urgency of this means that there is no other way than to do it through urgent decisions. Do you agree?
Yeah. So good luck to Democratic Services likely to have an extraordinary meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison. Councillor Worcester.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate there are members in the room that have been through this process before with local plans, but inadvertently or not, this is a really huge issue and will affect this borough for going through into the new council for 25 years, potentially until the next one is kind of generated like the one previously. So for that reason, I'm more than happy to come back for an extraordinary meeting if I have to. You know, I'm not wishing to put any more temporal schedules on other people, but I'm only speaking for myself. I'm more than happy to sit through an extraordinary to make sure we get this decision right as best we can, because I agree there won't be everybody that agrees, absolutely not. But I think that growth strategy was fundamental to what sites came forward. But I don't sit on the working group, so I don't know. I can only go on the information that I've been presented this evening. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Baldock.
I think a way through this would be, because we cannot create a suite of sites for the current proposal that's on the table. What we could do is have both sets submitted to full council. So it would require PTPWG to select sites for the second option, for the amended option, and then we would, if there's a way of bypassing PNR or having an emergency PNR to simply accept the recommendations of the alternative suite of sites, then you've got two options to go to full council. Because I really think there's a realistic chance that option 4 will not get through full council, and then we will be in a worse position if we have a recommended option and effectively it would have to go through as an amendment, but we've actually done the work for it, proposed as it can be proposed and debated on the night. We could then be in a position where whichever strategic option full council prefers, the work is done and it can be adopted.
I think that is slightly problematic in that the process is PTP recommends something to full council, PNR, they cannot recommend to full council because they're not decision making. PNR recommends something to full council. So the thing that PNR as a committee is recommended to full council is what full council consider. You can't recommend this or this because you have to recommend something.
No, that isn't what I said though. What I said was there would be a recommendation from PNR as it currently stands, but the work for basically what's on here, if it's the will of full council to go back to this option that was tabled for tonight, we're not in square one.
I think what you could do is in the full council paper, it would still need to come back through PNR. It can't go straight from PTP. But if there is an alternative option, even if it's not the recommended option from PNR, it can go as an alternative, non-recommended or recommended, depending on what happens at PNR, the other PNR, that could go. And in effect, they would have the option to agree the recommendation from PNR or say they preferred the alternative that is not the recommendation from PNR.
Yeah.
Yes.
But we've still got to work out how we get the strategic sites for option 4 sensibly done, which I still think will require a PTP working group followed by an emergency PNR to recommend it.
Yes. However, the urgent PNR, the recommendation will be that the sites that correlate with the option 4 that has been agreed today, so the new sites, we would have to put the option 6 sites that are not being agreed in as a not agreed, so that can, but I don't understand, I can't see how that would end up going. Sorry, I'm going to confirm with my colleague. I don't understand how that would end up going to full council if it's not a recommendation.
It would have to be as amendment.
A background.
Oh, it would have to be in a full amendment. Somebody would have to move it.
But it's got to end up on a paper somehow.
Is that not currently recommendation 2 on this report tonight,
But-
which hasn't been agreed one way or the other yet?
But if it's agreed,
Well, then yes, they would have to go as the recommendations on so option 4 and those option 6 recommended sites.
yes,
That would then be the recommendation to council.
that's right. But then we would, how would we have another P&R? Because we
You
couldn't,
can't
because that
recommend
decision.
something; it would only be giving an alternative option to council.
Yes.
So in relation to this existing P&R tonight, can they?
No, because it's important, as has been raised, that any advice and deliberations we do are transparent.
So I'm just thinking, because obviously they've got the recommendation put forward, but can they request the alternative option be put in the paper to council?
So they could do that today.
But then again, what they don't have, this
Is
is the
what
point,
it is.
they don't have those sites. So
Can they defer the decision
so-
on option 2 today to a further meeting?
yes, they could defer.
Those sites are in here.
But
Because then
we'd have to have a PTPWG
we'd have to
and
have a
another
PTP,
P&R
but we
and then
can't.
council.
If we agree it today, then that's game over. Because you can't then have another,
You
because
can't
we've
have
already
a
made the
second
decision.
recommendation if we've already got a
So
recommendation.
I think
Yeah.
it would be that it's deferred for another P&R, for another PTPWG, and then the option
Yeah.
comes back, and then members can request
Yeah.
that this is the one that's the recommendation and the other one is.
I think whilst technically we can do all that, we need to understand that the planning officer's point that further delay
Yes,
stops the timetable.
yes, that's right.
And I don't know if the planning officers need to speak just in relation to reaffirming that point.
Thank you. So just to clarify from the planning service perspective, any delay means that we would need to push the Reg 19 back to the autumn. And that sort of literally days is how tight the timescale is. So these options would mean the Reg 19 would take place in the autumn. And as Stuart has outlined, that would then mean requesting a delegation for officers to submit for examination. So kind of bypassing that end stage in the process. That would be the only way to still submit under the current NPPF. We've had many conversations rejecting submitting under the incoming framework for various reasons. And just to remind members that if we were submitting under the new framework, we're really knocking on the door of SBC not existing to submit, and that being the successor authority that would be required to do that work. So that's one of the multiple reasons why members were clear that we wanted to submit before 31st December 26.
If I can come in, yeah, I mean, that's my interpretation. Any delay tonight means we're going to have to go for an autumn consultation, which would mean that the committee cycle to choose to submit would have to be removed and delegated with authority given to officers. That's the only way we could accomplish it if there's a delay tonight.
Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Chair. So my personal view is it would be extremely undesirable for us not to have that feedback loop at the end of Regulation 19. That would not be that's certainly not what I would prefer. I don't believe that is the will of this council. My suggestion, therefore, is that we could hold an informal PTPWG that would allow the whole group, possibly a wider pool of councillors, to re-examine the HELA on the basis of these strategic sites and therefore propose an amendment that may or may not command any support, but that would be the will of, but that avoids us delaying any further time, i.e. this committee recommends these two proposals as they are, as the officers have advised us. Our non-strategic sites are aligned with either strategic site view. That is not the view of all councillors, but that is our officers' advice. And it is within the gift of any councillors, and I'm very happy to arrange an informal PTPWG that allows a group of councillors of any and all parties to come together and come up with an amendment that they feel better suits that. But I personally don't think it would be advisable for us to put in place anything that builds this delay, so I won't vote for an amendment that does that. But as I say, if we have an informal one that leads to an amendment on the 1st of April, although the irony of doing this on April Fool's Day is it gets more painful by the moment. But that's my suggestion. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hunt. Change your mind, Councillor Baldock.
The focus has to be that we leave full council with a decision. And I think, as I say, I think we need to have at full council a way of being able to decide if option 2 or option 4, whichever it is, hasn't got support, but there is an alternative on the table to avoid these delays, which is when we've got option 6 recommended and the strategy here, so that doesn't need any work. It may not be recommended, but it can be incorporated into one single amendment with all the paperwork. It's the strategic site, it's the sites for the new option that's going to be the problem. And I would say that having heard us tonight, the way we've changed and the way we're going to potentially allocate sites for local plan, any developer who's put forward something that isn't going to be accepted tonight would be able to say that our decision making was at risk and could easily challenge us with a judicial review, but we have not given their site decent consideration. But their site was removed on the basis of a strategic approach, which is not the one that council adopted. And if I was the developer behind Winterbourne, I'd be saying we specifically ruled that out on the basis of the strategic approach that we had, and now it's not being incorporated into consideration under the changed one. There's a lot of smaller sites where that would be the same situation, and I would be really worried that only one of them needs to threaten JR, and we'll be scuppered. We've had that in the past. It'll easily happen again.
Thank you. Councillor Bonney.
I can't believe that the committee's blown up the timetable, quite frankly. And to go back and ask the working group, who you've just ignored, the results of, what they came up with and said, no, we're throwing it back at you and want you to come up with an alternative set of sites. I mean, if you listen online to what's just happened, and I think if a developer listens, they will think, what a mess. What a mess. I am really concerned about the timetable now. We have no alternative. I actually think the committee maybe should be sitting down and going through this site by site, because what's the point of setting it back to the working group who you've already ignored?
Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. Members come up with the same decision based on a whole host of rationale, and what's important to one person, something else is important to other people. So the fact that there was a conclusion at PTPWG by one vote doesn't necessarily mean that the people that voted one way or the other all came to the same conclusion on the same specifics. Now, I may have misheard, but I thought the officer said that having changed the 6 to 4, I'm going to misquote you, but the gist of it was you can still go ahead with the second recommendation. Did I hear that wrong?
So in summary, that's correct. So the approach is a hybrid. So it looks at a growth option, then looks at the settlement hierarchy. So the approach to the settlement hierarchy is trying to get majority of the balance of need at the highest level settlements. So regardless of whether you go with option 4 or 6, you should be aiming to get as much as you can on suitable and so forth. What it is the final balance of need will change. So it may be that the lower tier settlements would then be required to accommodate less of the growth.
Thank you. I thought I was correct. So therefore, I move recommendation 2. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Wise.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. My concern is that whatever happened this evening, and I don't support the fact that working groups do put a lot of work into these sorts of things, and then the committees go ahead and do something different. So that's why I didn't vote for that to change. But regardless of that, my concern is that in effect with this timetable, we've obviously got to put all our eggs in one basket with this clearing full council on the 1st of April, and I don't think that's guaranteed whatever option was going forward. And that's my concern, because I do take the point that the working group would have been looking at this as a whole in how it would have determined this option selection. And therefore, regardless of what option is recommended to full council, my concern is that if we have a debate that's going to involve many more members than those here about this, that again, we're going to be stuck in this position of just facing a delay instead. And what we need to sort out here at this committee is not going through all of that and rehashing the whole thing, but coming up with something that means that we can try to give members the information they might need at that meeting to come to a decision. And it sounds like we were fairly balanced in support for either of those two options here. As it was at PTPWG, it seems reasonable to accept that might be the case at full council. So I just want to know how we as a committee can make sure that we don't lose the timetable because we're not able to provide the relevant information and documentation that is needed for a decision that could be either one of those. That is my overriding concern that I think we should be trying to resolve here.
Yeah, I'm just going to bring the chief exec in because I'm sure they'll be able to help us.
My understanding is, kind of rewinding, we have an amendment from Councillor Hunt to have a PTPWG. Was that an amendment to take this back to PTPW, which was seconded? We need to resolve that. We'd also, which we can't take until the first one's resolved, something from Councillor Gibson, Charles, which is that we have an informal PTPWG. We accept the recommendation tonight, and then there is a piece of work done to have an amendment oven ready that does not need to come back to PTP because it is not to PNR because it's not a formal. I think for the clarity that you have, I think we need to try and resolve the first the first amendment. If that falls, then if there is a seconder for Councillor Charles Gibson's amendment, then if either one of them pass, it will give the clarity that I think you're seeking, Councillor.
So, what is the difference between that and what Councillor Hunt and I have suggested? But we have a PTPWG because we need to select sites for option 4. Whereas, because the sites for option 6 are already on the table. And if you're not going to recommend them, they can just be attached as a amendment or alternative. The proposal for the PTP is exactly what you said, but we need to have that for the new set of strategic sites.
Thanks.
I think the difference is if it's an informal meeting of councillors that might be the PTPWG people, and you get together as councillors to come up with an amendment, that is different from having a no decision or no decision tonight, and then a PTP and then another P&R to have that decision. The only way that you can do the Councillor Gibson idea is if you have a resolution tonight, because that goes on the first, and then what you have in effect is an amendment, which is the alternative. If you don't make a decision tonight to enable PTP to consider something that's different, that maybe that has then have to have a decision, we need to have another P&R. So Councillor Hunt's amendment would require a P&R meeting. Councillor Gibson's suggestion, because it isn't an amendment and can't be until the first one's resolved, would suggest that you approve tonight recommending to full council, but the work goes on in the background to get an amendment that those people that would support that feel would get through, and that is different from the process, because you would just have it on the night and it wouldn't need to go through P&R.
I'm a bit worried it's not very public and transparent, is it? We went through a long meeting that is on record that people can watch how those allocations were made, why certain sites were included, some sites were not included. If we're going to have an amendment, so what we would be doing then is we would be recommending with a series of sites, subject to an amendment to make those sites actually fall in line with that strategy. And then we would be having an amendment to go for a different option with the sites recommended that have just been thrown out for the amendment for the other option. Who's chairing this? Karen? Is it poor Karen? I'd be joining her in the sickbed, I think. I think a PTP has to be done in public, but I think we can still get it done in time.
Okay, I'll check Councillor Martin, then I'll go for the. Sorry, Councillor Gibson, did you?
Officers are saying we can't get it done in time. Councillor Hunt's solution means not reviewing Reg 19 after October. That is what our officers are telling us that timetable means. So that you don't have to agree with them, but that is what they're telling us.
Yeah, but it's wrong. What we're doing is we're setting stuff up so that when we meet on the full council, we have both options with appropriate strategic sites to both options, so that on the night, whichever option with its suite of sites, one of the two can be adopted. And hopefully one of the two can be adopted. But that's what we need to be focusing on. We need to be focusing on getting proper options, proper strategic options with appropriate suite of sites, and an amendment, basically what's on this paper here. The amendment is actually the easy bit, because it's already what's on here. Yeah. It's getting an appropriate suite of sites for option 4, which I don't think we've got. I don't think this would stand up at all. As I say, there are options on here that have been discounted that I would have brought back.
Right, thank you. Councillor Martin.
To counteract that point, as officers have now said 3 times, I've counted, I think, the non-strategic site allocations, i.e. recommendation 2, works for both option 4 that we have now got on the table and option 6. You can disagree with it. Anyone can disagree with it because they may have made a decision based on a different premise. You may have decided not to include Winterbourne Fields because of the strategic allocation. Somebody else might have decided not to include it because they actually felt that it doesn't fit with the settlement hierarchy, which I believe is what Councillor Harrington said. Realistically, at full council, anyone can propose that we amend back to option 6 or option 2 or option 3 or whatever other option they want. And if that gets through, that gets through. And anyone can make proposals to change the list of these non-strategic sites. And I think the suggestion that Councillor Gibson has made, given that he disagrees with it, is actually really quite valiant and honourable to say, I will help you build the amendment to change something, even though I agree with the thing that you want to change. I know, but it just, I think it makes sense.
Okay.
It keeps us on the timetable. If we progress with what we've got, we actually get a recommendation. You can amend it at full council or try to amend it at full council. What happens there is probably where we end up. But I think it's a solution and it's the sensible, logical way forward.
So how does having this informal PTP delay anything? That's what I don't understand. Well, if we have an informal one that is at least filmed, then yeah, let's have an informal one then. I just think it's got to be filmed so that people can see the discussion.
The PTP isn't the issue. The issue is you can have your informal PTP and it can be filmed, but in order to not have to come back here, you have to have a recommendation to full council. Once you've got that recommendation, the PTP can be filmed, it can be, it can happen. You have a PTP tomorrow. You can add it, because it's a working group, you can add it to the agenda for tomorrow if as an urgent item. I mean, I'm not suggesting you should, but what I'm saying is, as long as you have got a recommendation going to full council, you have got time. If you decide not to have a recommendation tonight, you then, in order to get to full council, have to have another formal P&R meeting to have that's all I'm saying.
Yes, John. Yeah.
Thank you. So if I can just speak to the suggestion that we could do this as an urgent item at PTP tomorrow, looking at the chair, but I will just say what I was going to say. The paper that we use for the January meeting, we'd use exactly that, because the January meeting set out all the options that we had. So there is a paper in the public domain that has the information we would need. We've got other items on the agenda for tomorrow. Obviously, I'll defer to the chair, but just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt.
I was just wanting to just get clarification from officers, because we're saying about obviously take it to PTBWG. We can take it somewhere else. If we go on full council on the night, we can make an amendment and do a different option then. But we've got to remember that we've got to have the evidence behind all of this. And especially I'm thinking about the traffic modelling and all that sort of work that officers need. If we're talking about doing two different lots, and even if there's amendment on the night of full council, officers will still need to go away and do that modelling work if it hasn't been done. So there's, whatever way we do this, there's a cost implication to start off with that needs to be considered. And there's the time of doing the additional work for two different things. So just need some clarification from officers.
Okay, thank you. I'll bring the officers in. Stuart?
I mean, behind the scenes, we're doing as much work as we can to get all our evidence base ready to go. But because we have the committee system and sites could come in and out, we can't start the work until we have an agreement through the current process at full council on the suite of sites and the growth option. So, we're basically beholden to that. So until we get that final decision, we can't progress anything. So we're ready to go, but yeah, we need a decision either way, effectively.
Okay, thank you. Right, so we've got a proposal on the floor. Councillor Hunt?
Yeah, I just want to get this right, because Councillor Baldock made a proposal and I did an amendment that he then accepted. So I think it's actually his proposal as amended. He withdrew. Okay, yep, that's fine. Then it's mine that it's we go back to PTBWG with all the details, so we can then suggest that then comes back tomorrow if the chair agrees that it can do that. Yeah.
Can I just clarify, Councillor? Is your amendment that the decision is not taken tonight, subject to a further PTP, which means it needs to come back, or is it what is in effect, what Councillor Gibson suggested is that we make the decision tonight, and then you still have the meeting to come up with a possible amended alternative? Because originally your proposal, your amendment, would suggest that we wouldn't take a decision tonight.
Yep.
and that it had to come back. Is that what your amendment is? Just for clarity, apologies.
Yes, because we need to do that work on there to make sure it's completely right before we can make that decision. So yes.
It's very unusual, I know, but I just wondered if I could ask just a point of information. Is it not possible for this committee to delegate to the PTPWG the authority to report directly to full council?
No.
It's not. Okay.
No.
I don't know where it says that in the consultation.
Okay. Councillor Wilson, I'll take it really quickly because I don't move this on.
So just for clarity, I was just concerned that when we're talking about shoving something onto this agenda tomorrow, I thought we had some rules around giving members due time for consideration. So we've made this decision tonight. We're slapping something on an agenda maybe tomorrow. So they've had less than 24 hours notice to actually consider the work they're being asked to do. I'm not sure how fair that is on the members of the working group. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, respectfully, I think all those members on that working group probably know this inside out, upside down, standing on their head, eat, drink and sleep it, and have spent many hours, so I don't think there's any difficulties there. Councillor Bowen.
I think just hit the nail on the head with that one, Mr. Chairman. It's again coming back. Because it's a working group. They are not making the decision. They will make a recommendation, and as they've had the information in various formats beforehand. The only thing I would then suggest, if that amendment is agreed, we would therefore need to have another P&R probably next week in order for it to be ready and oven-proofed for full council on the 1st of April.
Yeah. Councillor Gold.
I thought the understanding the only way, if there's a formal PTPWG, which I understand is Councillor Hunt's suggestion, that needs a formal P&R, but only one recommendation can come to council from P&R. If at the moment, if we make the decision or send the recommendation to council tonight, an informal PTPWG can do the work for an amendment on the night at council. And that doesn't then need to go through P&R, and there's a chance of it, and then it wouldn't delay. So that there would be a preparation for an amendment that would meet the objections of those who feel that option 4 doesn't have the suite of sites with it that would be needed. But it wouldn't actually come as a recommendation. We'd actually be doing the original recommendation tonight so that council can actually make the decision, so that process can go forward. If we go formally to PTWG, it's got to come back to P&R to make a formal recommendation, and then we're back in square one.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah,
I
that was
move the question now be put.
Councillor Hunt, are you prepared to?
Yeah, having listened, I'm happy to change that we go with the informal.
Sorry, I can't hear. There's other members talking at the same time, unfortunately.
Just saying that I'm happy to change my amendment to go the informal route as being proposed. It seems to be making sense that we still get the same outcome, but we try and speed it up.
Right, thank you. Are you happy to second that? Councillor Harrison, did you?
Sorry, it was a procedural motion, Chair, that the question now be put, and it was seconded.
Councillor Hunt, could you just repeat your amendment then, please, for the minutes? So we've got formal record.
So that it will be going to informal PTPWG. Is it informal? I'll tell you what, I'll just withdraw my...
No, I'll just... Yeah, sorry.
You don't need an amendment if you're going to do the informally bit, because you'll agree it and you just do the informally bit. The amendment is if you're not taking a decision tonight. that would be, yes, your amendment.
But are we going to vote on PTP tomorrow?
That would be up to the chair.
So somebody's got to request it, haven't they? and all that.
If Councillor Hunt will indulge me, I believe the amendment he is attempting to suggest is that we have an informal PTPWG meeting tomorrow evening, immediately following our formal PTPWG meeting, which already has an agenda and agreed in public, at which we discuss this amendment. The amendment possibilities, and therefore don't cause any further delay, and ergo approve recommendation 2.
Yeah, as long as it's filmed.
Thank you. Sorry.
So, just to clarify, if members are minded this evening to proceed to vote on recommendation 2 and it is passed, no amendment is required.
Okay, members. So, that said, I think we can go back to recommendation 2, proposed by Councillor Harrison, seconded by Councillor Martin. Those in favour? Nine. Those against? Okay, prepared to record. We had been asked for a recorded vote previously. Yeah. Okay, Councillor Baldock.
Against.
Councillor Bowen. Councillor Charles Gibson. And myself, 4. Councillor Gold.
4.
Councillor Harrison.
4.
Councillor Hunt.
Against.
Councillor Jays.
Against.
Councillor Last. 4. Councillor Martin.
4.
Councillor Chapman.
Against.
Councillor Palmer.
Against.
Councillor Speed.
4.
Councillor Wise. 4. And Councillor Worcester.
4.
Members, that's carried 10 for 5 against. Are there any abstentions? I should have asked, of course. I didn't see that. Fine. Thank you. Right, we now move on to agenda item 10, which I hope will be a little bit easier. Thank you. And I'll thank our officer to introduce this to us, Steph. Thank you.
Sorry.
Oh, you.
I'm there. Okay, lost my notes now. Bear with. So members will recall that on the 30th of July, the council agreed to undertake a community governance review, and the stage 1 consultation was undertaken from the 18th of December to the 9th of February. The work has been supported by the officers. However, there has been an in-depth member working group, and the leader has agreed that the chair of that group, Councillor Mike Whiting, should introduce the recommendations. So through you, Chair, if I'm able to hand over to Councillor Whiting.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Leader, and thank you, Larissa. Yeah, as chairman of the all-party member group, we've been working very hard, looking in detail at the governance review, following the agreement of the council last year. I'd just like to start, if I may, Leader, just by thanking, first of all, my Vice Chairman, Councillor Baldock, and all the members of the working group for their hard work, often late into the night, and for their attention to detail. And my word, there was a lot of detail, that was for sure. I'd also like to thank the professional way they discuss some sometimes complicated and sometimes controversial issues, always with respect and good humour, and I think their thoughtful deliberations have resulted in an excellent set of proposals that are set out. Particular thanks obviously go to Louise Galloway and Steph Curtis, who've put in the very long hours, well above the call of duty, to keep us so well briefed. and informed, and for guiding us through the process and writing such clear papers for your committee tonight. And thanks also to our Chief Exec, whose committee so much have heard time personally and expertise to the process. Hopefully members will have read the papers, which I think are pretty self-explanatory. They follow on from our stage 1 consultation. We've taken the results of that consultation, we've looked at them in detail. I did promise at the full council meeting, Leader, that we would read every consultation response and consider it carefully, and members did that, and to their credit, they did it with great dedication, because it took a long time to go through, and changes have been made to the stage 2 consultation that are in line with those things that were suggested by people who responded to the first one. So it's what it is. I'm happy to answer any questions, but I'm sure Steph is here and with all the technical details to answer any questions members may have. But I can commend the report to your members, Leader, and hope that they will approve this so we can move it forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the working group, because there is an awful lot of work gone into this. I appreciate it. My question is, and don't say I'm a dinosaur either, but my question is that most of this response is online, and that's fair enough. It's all right, but you're talking across me. And that's fair enough, but the vast majority of people are not online. It's a bit like, you know, when you actually do a survey and find out all these people haven't actually got access to a car. There's an awful lot of people ain't got access to online. So my concern would be that the more that things are being firmed up, the more important it is that you actually access as many members of the public as you know, residents, as you possibly can. And I do recall, and there were other people here at the time, when there was a suggestion that there be a parish council for halfway, and you know, I will admit people tend to think, oh, these are once in a lifetime votes. Well, they are once in a lifetime, except when it suits. But when they had the once in a lifetime, do we want a parish council in halfway? It was an all postal ballot. And every member, every resident in the halfway boundary had the opportunity to have their say. And that was the fairest way, wasn't my decision, but that was the fairest way to do things. So I've got some questions on how going forward we are going to get to decisions. I mean, I'm not going to suggest that, just cost of the postage stamps these days, you need a mortgage. But you have got to make it fair, and there is no point saying, "Oh yeah, well the majority of people who wrote in on the online, oh, and we had one handwritten letter said that they want this, that, and the other," when the majority of people in that area have not contributed because they didn't have access, weren't aware of it, blah 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 blah. So I do think that we need to be very careful on these things. I know, you know, tech going forward, but then we and other organisations are putting money into the, what do you call it? Something deprivation, technologically deprived, digital deprivation. That's the word. So I'm not expecting an answer, Chair. I would hope that whoever in this room is on this working group will be taking these things away and giving due consideration to how they can ensure that, let's say 90%, I'd like 100, but let's say 90% of residents actually have the opportunity to input to a decision on whatever question comes up. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm getting nods from the visiting member and chair of that group. So, thank you. You probably can't see him because of the column. Councillor Baldock.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to thank Councillor Whiting for doing all this as well. It was quite a task, and the officers who have been really proactive. Road shows, videos, less said about the better. But yeah, we have gone through this in some detail, so it's a bit rich, but I'm now going to just say there is one aspect of this, but it would be remiss of me if I didn't raise it. The Snips Hill, it's not Snips Hill, anyway, what's on page 188, you have 2 maps of Merston. One is the proposed and one is the existing. And I just feel strongly, based on feedback that Carrie has fed back as well. I did think she was going to be here tonight, but maybe she fell asleep during the scintillating discussion earlier.
Well, you do most of the talking.
Yeah, I know. That should have kept her well alert. I think that we should the proposed boundary should include the Snips Hill estate. I know I won't get any support for it, but I've got to propose it because I think it is the right thing. So I'm formally proposing that. Also, which page is the huge mega land grab of bobbing to encompass Meads and the Grove Parks? I thought we were going to go out on that, and I can't see it. Yeah, they are 194 is the Meads. Oh, that's the Meads and the Grove Park, isn't it? So that no, it isn't. But there should be what we agreed with. There'd be a map that would take the Meads and the Grove Park and the existing running along Staplehurst Road. Which map is that?
So is it map 22? Is that the right one?
Yeah, but that doesn't include the Meads. There was one that was supposed to be the Meads and Grove Park. So it included all of it in one large map. That's what we did agree.
Okay.
I think what it would be map 21.
It's map 21 and map 22 in effect together, isn't it?
Yeah, it would come down to Staplehurst Road along the A2, back of the gardens of the A2. Sorry, Steph. And is there one that didn't include Grove Park at all? It's just bobbing and the Meads, I thought we were supposed to do. No? I thought there was 3. There was like the rather large grab everything. There was bobbing taking the Meads, and then bobbing taking Grove Park separately. So I was expecting 3 maps.
So map 21 is the bobbin extension to include all of the Meads.
Yep.
Map 20 was just the Meads on its own that includes part of Bobbin Parish as it stands, but that,
Yep.
yeah, so map 20 would be the standalone Meads Parish Council, yeah, including part of what is the existing Bobbin Parish Council. Yeah, map 21 is all of the Meads included within all of Bobbing, and then map 22 was the Bobbing with just Grove Park extension.
Yeah, so there needed to be a 3rd map that included that extra little corner of Chalkwell. Not of Chalkwell, but it says Chalkwell for some reason.
If I may, I thought that Steph will correct me, but I thought we'd agreed that we would draw the boundary along Staplehurst Road, Mike, which is where it is there now. So it doesn't include that extra little bit of Chalkwell.
I have my phone on. The boundary in map 22 is correct, but that takes in the one that doesn't exist is the one that's got the bit of Chalkwell and the whole of the Meads. We've got one with the Meads, one with Grove Park, but there isn't one that takes in both. That should be the 3.
So in that case, we need to include an additional map that includes Meads and Grove Park,
Yeah.
all as part of bobbing. Is
Yeah.
that what you're asking? Okay.
That's what we agreed.
Just going to bring our chief exec.
Councillor Baldock, you've said that you wish to make a change to the Snips Hill. Is that a formal amendment?
Can I get the one I might get agreed first done? Is that agreed? Are we agreed to that 3rd map as what we meant to do?
One second, Councillor Hunt, do you want to comment on that?
I'd comment on the 3rd map because the concern that I've got, which is what we were talking about, is about confusing people too much with too many maps when we've got things going on. With map 21 and 22, if what we were talking about is we've got the postcodes and we know where people are doing it. And when we come to that next stage, the working group will be going through it to work out what's going to do and then drawing up those final boundaries. So if, for instance, on map 22, people within that additional Grove Park area say that they want to be part of bobbing, we know that because we know that they have said that thing. If most of the residents that are outside of the bobbing parish currently say that they want to be part of the Meads bobbing, we then know that we've got people that want to be part of Meads bobbing and Grove Park bobbing. So we then can draw in that extra boundary. After that, you don't need another map to be able to get the details that we need to make the decision.
Councillor Baldock?
Well, that would mean that we're basically looking for an outcome that we're not offering, which seems a bit odd. Also, I can see people being really confused. If you're in this bit of Gadby Road and you want to be part of bobbing, you think, well, I'm not included in that, but I want, do we want the whole of the Meads or do we just want a little bit? I just think we did indicate that we were going to do 3 maps, so I think that's what we should do.
Okay, again, I wasn't at that working group, so I don't know, and it sounds like it's a riveting read as well.
Yeah, I mean, again, Chair, if I may, Steph will correct me, but I think Councillor Hunt's sort of recollection is pretty spot on, because we appreciate that we can't go out with hundreds of choices, and we were under the clear advice of the chief exec that we really ought to be providing people with an option. What we chose to do in Grove Park was kind of give them 2 options.
Yeah.
But it's always down to the respondees to be or respondents to make suggestions that we haven't come up with, which is what Councillor Hunt was referring to, which I think is indicated in the maps.
Yeah, just put it to the vote and let it get voted down.
And what about your Snips Hill?
Sorry.
Yeah, Councillor Bonney, please don't interrupt. I'm in the middle of a full flight here with Councillor Baldock. Right, so your Snips Hill proposal?
Yeah, I'll make that as well.
Is that a formal proposal? Seconded by Councillor Jays. Those in favour of that? Those against? Oh, sorry. Right, those in favour, I'll just count those. I was too quick, apparently. Those in favour? Those are... 4. Make it 4. 5. Where's your 5th? Those against? 7. Abstentions? 3. That's lost. Yeah, it's lost. Yeah. So it's lost. 7-5-3. Thank you. Right, members, can we then take all of these on block. Oh,
Can I speak?
oh, sorry, Councillor Bonnie. Yes, you did ask. Yeah.
Sorry, yeah. So there's one thing that's occurred to me, and sorry, I wasn't part of the working group, but we've got this new development on Swan Street Avenue, where the Pick Your Own Fruit place used to be. And I've got a feeling that a portion of it, like a corner of it, falls within Robinson Parish boundary. But from I suppose, a local's perspective, if you're a new resident moving in there, you're not going to identify yourself as living in Robinson, because actually you've got a few fields gap there. And that development should probably be part of that whole Swan Street Avenue / Sittingbourne area. So if there are boundaries being changed, and I'm sorry, I can't bring up the maps, because when I'm online, it just says access denied.
Councillor Baldock might be able to help. He seems on the ball with the maps.
Yeah, it's map 23. That's all included within the proposed urban Sittingbourne Council boundary.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, thank you.
Thank you. That was an easy resolution. Councillor Jays.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, I'm the Chair of Minster Parish Council, and I know we wouldn't support the current proposed boundaries that would be for halfway, but I'm sure we can sort that out at the stage 2 consultation.
Lovely. Thank you. Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Leader. My question was noting the number of responses we've had from out-of-area residents, particularly on those questions where the current responses are very close. Like some of the Iwade boundary questions, some of the Faversham boundary questions, where those people in the area directly affected are evenly split. Do we have a system for taking in the views of those people who have expressed a view but don't live in that area? I.e., if 50% of the people who live in the bit of Ospringe we're talking about, if there is no agreement between them, i.e. half of them believe one thing and half of them believe the other thing, have we got a system of using the views of the wider population to allow us to make a decision? Or do we stick with the status quo? It's kind of a procedural question.
Yeah. Just let me know and I'll put her version forward just to tip it over the top.
It's common sense based on the data that we get back.
Thank you. Common to who? Right, Councillor Speed.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just check what the process is from here? I presume that the results of the round 2 consultation will result in an officer's report that comes back to P&R for approval. Will there be a reasonable timescale built in for parish councils to respond to what those proposals are? Because obviously it's parish councils that are primarily affected. Because certainly for this meeting, it was just published as part of the agenda, so there was only a week. Will there be a longer time frame for parish councils just to feed back any
That would be my expectation, but I'll default to our officer. Thank you.
Yep, so parish councils will be written to as the stage 2 consultation goes live. So yeah, they'll be invited to respond on all of the sort of the maps. And yeah, they'll have the link to the online form and can get access to sort of the paper forms and whatever other methods we're going to put into place. And then you're quite correct. Once the consultation closes, the member steering group will meet again, probably on at least 2 occasions, and then a report will come back to this P&R committee and then on to full council for the final recommendations.
Okay, but when that report is written, will there be a reasonable time frame between the report being published and the P&R meeting for parish councils to give any final feedback on the final recommendations?
At this stage, the timescales are quite tight. I believe the view would be that the consultation responses will be sort of that opportunity for parish councils to have their say. We've obviously had conversations with parish councils already around what some of these proposals look like. So, yeah, so again, unless Councillor Whiting has anything to add, my view would be that
that's right, Chair, through you. And we've extended the stage 2 consultation time to 9 weeks. There was an original proposal that we had it at 7 weeks to get things done more quickly, so we could get it in time to get the proposals to full council and thence on to government. We've extended that by 2 weeks on the advice, on some legal advice, to ensure that parish councils do have plenty of opportunity to respond.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Wise.
Thank you, Chair. As a member of the working group, I think it's a valid point to make that you do have to pay particular attention to the responses that people give based on the postcodes that they provide. It is really valuable getting that information as part of the response, because I do think there can be, from the initial consultation, which was obviously much broader than what will be going out as part of the stage 2, that you could see clearly expressed preferences from people that in the free text part of their responses that didn't correspond to the yes or no that they gave. So just to reassure people, that was all teased out by members in the working group before they came to this. That was all spotted, noted and accounted for. So the way that the data is looked at by the working group for these proposals was very thorough. So just to sort of provide some reassurance about that.
Thank you. And finally, Councillor Worcester.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to confirm, as the Chair of Sheerness Town Council, I want the opportunity to respond as, even though we're not merging, or the option for Halfway isn't there to merge with Sheerness, I want the opportunity to wholeheartedly support, if Halfway does get a parish council, they get the right amount of assets, including the boundary change, so that there is the potential that if these parish councils come into existence, they can actually do things like potentially have allotments, like potentially have community buildings, because they've got the right amount of assets allowed to them by the other parishes that are kind of neighbouring them. So even though Sheerness is only mentioned in the boundary change, can I be reassured that we will get also the opportunity to come back if that's possible? Thank you.
Yep, Steph.
I mean, what I would suggest is that, yeah, if there's boundary changes that you believe from Sheerness Town Council should take place to enable, as you say, that sharing of assets with any potential new parish councils, that you put that forward in your consultation response so that the member steering group can consider that. As I say, the maps have been drawn based upon the first stage consultation responses, and they are subject to change pending that second stage consultation. So if there's any factors like that you believe the member steering group and then ultimately the council should consider as part of drawing those lines, then yeah, please make sure that Sheerness Town Council puts that forward in the consultation response.
Thank you. So could I have a proposer for the recommendations? We'll take all three, I think, together. Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Baldock. The seconder. Councillor Worcester, thank you. And those in favour? That's unanimous, members. Thank you very much indeed. And at this point, could we just get agreement to extend the meeting beyond 10 o'clock, just in case we don't quite get there? Thank you. Right. Thank you. We now move on to agenda item 11. And this is the corporate plan. And I'm looking to my right on this occasion.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. So following the May 2023 borough election, the administration developed a corporate plan which set out their vision and ambition for the borough for the period 2023 to 2027. The corporate plan was adopted by the council in April 2024. The report this evening is the second annual update report presented to P&R Committee and provides an update on the actions in the corporate plan. Out of 59 actions, 47 are rated as green, 9 of those are completed, 37 are ongoing or on track for completion, and 1 is completed and the delivery is ongoing. 12 are rated as amber and none are rated as red. This shows that since the update report was presented in March last year, 4 actions have moved from amber to green and 2 have moved from red to amber. 1 that was rated as both red and amber has this year moved to amber. The report mentions that the current corporate plan covers the period 2023 to 2027. Currently, the timeline for local government reorganisation states that vesting day for the new unitary council is the 1st of April 2028. Until vesting day, Swell Borough Council services will continue to operate, and it's important that a corporate plan is in place to ensure that the council's resources continue to be allocated in a coherent, accountable and effective way. This will provide clarity about the organisation's priorities and to ensure coherent decision making by members, as well as to help inform the new unitary about what the local priorities are. It's recommended that members and officers start work on developing a new corporate plan in the autumn of this year. Members are invited this evening to note and discuss the update as presented at Appendix 1 and to consider Recommendation 2 to start work on developing a new corporate plan in autumn 2026, effective from May 2027. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Janet. Councillor Baldock, please.
Happy to note and agree, but as I've mentioned, I think when this was discussed before, we must keep our eyes on the fact that delivering our existing policies and our existing strategies must take precedence over talking about new ones. So, yes, I agree that the new corporate plan needs to start in December 2026, but as a cautionary note, really, we should not divert too many resources from our current delivery, because that actually delivering is important.
Agree, thank you. Councillor Gibson, please.
Happy to second and echo that sentiment. I suppose a question as to whether this requires an amendment, just in case the possibility that local government reorganisation grinds to a halt or something more important happens or chaos continues to reign and we don't get there, do we need to amend 2027-28, or are we content that the member working group that starts the work on the new corporate plan will be competent in the autumn to agree that we're not agreeing a 1 year corporate plan, we're going to agree a new 4 year one, and we therefore don't need to amend it tonight?
So there so many questions at such a late hour. So in the event that someone says LGR really wasn't a great idea or it's going to be put back, there is the question about whether we'd have elections. And in the event we'd have an elections, it would be up to the new administration to decide what they'd want to do with the corporate plan. So it doesn't need an amendment, because as what we know now is that vesting day is 1st of April 2028. We have no idea whether that's going to be put back, cancelled, happen. So you can do this in the knowledge that this is based on the fact, our knowledge now is that we won't have elections, because we have been told that we won't have elections if there are elections to the Shadow Authority in 2027. So you can do that, and in the event that there were elections, it would be up to whoever was the administration to decide whether to do a new.
Thank you. Councillor Hunt.
Thanks, Jay. I just want to raise, I suppose, a concern on how the RAG system works on this, because if I pick one thing out, just to show what I'm saying, 3.9 in the table, page 223 or 17 of 25, whatever way you're looking at it, build on the benefits of an improved street cleansing service, and the indicator remains amber because the project's still ongoing and to make street cleansing service more efficient. Where we are with street cleansing, as far as I'm aware, is we're way behind where we should be. It should have been sorted out ages ago with the current contract. And I would have looked at that to say that it was actually red, because we're way behind where we should be. Okay, it's maybe on track to be completed at some point, but if we're behind on it, why is it showing as amber? And if that is through the whole thing, through all of this, there could be some parts of the corporate plan, but we're way behind on delivering where we should have been. But it actually makes it look better than what it actually is. So it's just something maybe to consider for the future one. We want to make sure, are we meeting the targets where we actually should be?
Thank you. Janet, did you want to comment?
Yes, so for that one, obviously the head of service judged that as an amber, and looking at the definitions, I would agree with him, because the action isn't on hold. I mean, there is a bit of a grey area between them all, but it isn't on hold. And but the timeline has been revised. It is delayed, but it is still on target for completion. So I would agree with that, but yes, with others as well. There can be some crossover, and it is a judgment call for the head of service which one it should be. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks. So in that case, just when the new corporate plan is looked at, maybe it's the definitions that need to be looked at to make sure that we've got it right of what we're trying to achieve, to that we know.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Worcester.
Thank you, Chair. Really quick one. 2.7, support skills development through advocacy and partnership working. I've said it since I've got elected. It would be really lovely for Swale to be able to shout about its work experience it offers and its apprenticeship that it offers, and potentially our third-party apprenticeships that we offer through our third-party contractors. And that's not mentioned, which I think is a real shame that that's not part of that particular update, because it's such good work and it provides any investment that this council puts in young people training and doing what we should be supporting them to do, means that money invested is paying over and over and over again. So is some of the best value investment that we're giving taxpayers. I would just love to see it shouted about a bit more, and I think it deserves a place in our corporate plan going forward. If not this one, definitely the next one. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bowen.
Just very, very quickly. As an example, 4.3 on page 225 or 19 of 25, whichever one. Ensure we address health inequalities in all our policies, ensuring a blueprint for a healthy borough. Not arguing with that. It's the actions updates. Health implications are considered as part of the decision-making process of all policies. I'm struggling to recall a committee meeting, where we've actually had a section of what's the health inequality issues here. So I'm not sure they actually are discussed on all policies, certainly not by members. Granted, probably the officers, but I don't think that translates to members as an observation.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
Is anyone speaking?
I did press it, it didn't work. It's getting late. The eco implications, we used to have LA21 implications. There's a whole host of them. And it actually says whether there are any. Most of the time it says there are no health implications. It is up to members to say, no, hang on a minute, there is health implications there because of X, Y, Z. But sometimes it does say the health implications of this are. So, yes, that is factually correct.
Thank you for that factual correction. Members, I don't see anybody else indicating, so we'll take both recommendations. I've had a proposed by Councillor Baldock. There a second, please. Councillor Harrison, thank you. Oh, you did, sorry. Councillor Harrison, that's fine. Those in favour? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much, members. And thank you, Janet. We now move on to our final item, you'll be pleased to know, for the evening, and I'm sure Jamil will definitely be pleased to know, which is the Graveney and Goodnestone Conservation Areas review.
Thank you, Chair. So we've got 3 conservation areas in front of you today: Graveney Church, Graveney Bridge, and Goodnestone. And this review was undertaken by Concepcion Architects, and we decided to combine all 3 conservation areas into one document. And there are 3 extensions, smaller extensions for each conservation area proposed, which is presented. And we received 12 responses, and most of those responses asked for further extension of Graveney Church Conservation Area, which we assess to be not important enough because there's a big agricultural field between the listed building proposed to be included in the conservation area, and that field itself was not considered to be of sufficient historic significance. And the listed building, because of its listed status, had its own set of protections, and it protected its setting on its own. So these are the two key things that I bring to members' notice. And then we also had a very detailed response from ICNE consultants regarding 2 applications within the area. And I have included officer's response in the consultation document and have summarized it in the report. So the recommendation is to note the character appraisal and management strategy document for the review of Graveney Church, Graveney Bridge, and Goodnestone conservation areas and representations made by interested parties, and adopt the character appraisal and management strategy subject to any minor editorial amendments and formatting. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamil. Councillor Gibson.
As usual, fantastic piece of work. Really detailed and impressive, and protecting one of my favourite views as my regular dog walk. So a big fan. A minor editorial correction, which does not require amendment. That Councillor Baldock appears to have a slightly old job title on page 254. So that can probably be corrected. He is, of course, still our heritage champion. So there's no reason not to have him there. But he is not a cabinet member anymore. But other than that, a fantastic report, and I spotted no other typos when I was slightly more awake reading this several hours ago.
Well, perhaps you should look at the report title and you'd have seen one there on Goodnestone. So I think there's just an E missing off that, but however, that's been apparent. Councillor Baldock.
Thank you, Chairman. I commend Jamil as always on getting these done and processed. I think this one is a really attractive one for what is actually quite a small area. There's so much in it. And I particularly welcome, because I could never understand why the Lich Gate wasn't included in the original conservation area. So I'm glad that we've tidied that one up. A little query on the boundary on Graveney Church is that it doesn't align with the field boundary. Not sure why that is. It's on page 96. But apart from that, yeah, I think this is another really good piece of work. And this must bring the total number that we've done to over 30. That's all right.
It's not a test, Jamil.
So happy to propose it.
Thank you, Councillor Wise. Members, those in favour? And that's unanimous. Thanks ever so much, Jamil. Thank you. And that concludes that marathon session. Thank you very much, members.